Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to the Khaitan and Company in-house forum. The agenda for today's discussion is business thinking for in-house lawyers. Our panelists for the day are Jolly Abraham, who is the General Counsel for the private equity fund True North. She'll bring an investor's perspective on the agenda. Mr. Rajiv Chaube, who is the Group General Counsel for the Dalmia Bharat Group. Mr. Sanjeev Gemawat, who is the Managing Director and Group General Counsel for SR, and Rachit Kevalramani, who is the Director with JIPS Management Advisors. Rachit brings the perspective of an intermediary that connects lawyers to corporations, and each of these panelists will bring a different perspective to today's discussions. Thank you, each one, and welcome to today's panel. May I begin, Sanjeev, Rajiv, Jolly, and Rajat, by asking each one of you, what does business thinking mean for you in the context of in-house counsels today? And Jolly, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. What is business thinking? It is thinking with the business for the business. You're not outside of the business. You are in the business. You're there to make the business succeed. So, in one line, it is thinking for the business with your business colleagues.
Thinking with the business for the business. I love that. Rajiv ji, can I turn this question to you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here. I think I fully resonate with what Jolly just said. As we, as student of law, have always studied that law is not to be read in isolation. So when we talk about general law, which impacts the society, and one fine example I'll give you, when the Nirbhaya episode happened, the criminal law had to be amended because, rape as a offense against the society, the what do you call, the government and the parliamentarians had to assemble and amend the law. So that's on the law as a society. So similarly, when we are working in house, I think we are working for an organization, whatever be the business, you need to have a complete understanding of the business. What is the nature, what is the operations, who are your customers, who are your key suppliers, what are the various stakeholders who are involved. So it's a complete 360-degree view of the business, and it's very important. Otherwise you will feel isolated unless you understand the business of the company. You cannot really add value.
Understood. I think the theme of understanding the business will tie in with a few questions that I'll have for you, Rajiv, later. But Sanjeev, what is your perspective on what does business thinking mean for the in-house counsel?
Shishir, thank you very much for having me here. I think very important conversation. The way in which I look at the role of GC in the business thinking, in my view, GC or the in-house counsel, he's the strategizer for the business, he's enabler for the business, and he's protector for the business. And his role of the strategizer, enabler, and protector, that defines him. And that defines him in terms of that he has that business orientation while taking decisions on legal issues. It's not important what is legally correct. What is important is what is legally safe for the organization to win the matters. And I think this is how the business orientation of a lawyer or in-house counsel would play its role.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Rachit, last on this point, how do you, as go between corporations and candidates, how do you, in your experience, define business thinking for in-house lawyers? Rachit, you're on mute.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Shishir, thank you for having me on this panel. I think I resonate with what each of the co-panelists have mentioned. You know, business leaders are not just looking for a legal analysis of the problem; they're looking for commercially feasible legal advice. And commercially feasible legal advice, you know, as Sanjeev ji alluded to, not only factors in legal risks but also operational risks, market-related risks. So that smart application of law, which encompasses all of these, to me, that is business thinking.
Perfect. So, Gigi, I'm going to drill down a little deeper into this theme. From where you stand, how has the role of in-house counsel evolved in Indian companies over the last 5 years? And specifically, do you feel that in-house counsel now have a greater need to be familiar with the operations, a greater need to do plant visits, a greater need to spend time with the distribution network, so on and so forth?
Well, Shishir, it's again very important question, and I think, and I will give you some perspective on this. And I think last 5 years, of course, I would come to that. But then first, I would give you the perspective, the way in which I look at it, is that this role evolved the last 2 decades, and it's nothing new. As the economy grows, you will end up having new professions getting created, and this is one of that kind of profession. It's typically called a cravat system. What in the United States emerged as a cravat system in the late 70s or so. In our case, it started nearly after say 2 decades of that cravat system. So rule evolved, and we have seen in the last 2 decades the way in which the role got enhanced, and this is one such profession which doesn't have the statutory recognition, but still this profession is thriving. People are looking for this kind of profile and everything, largely because legal and regulatory system had undergone a change. Now, coming to your specific questions on what happened in the last 5 years. Last 5 years, Shishir, has been very, very transformative. And the way in which I look at it is mainly because of the two reasons. Last 2 years, we have seen disruption, and that disruption was mainly this disruption on account of supply chain disruption, largely arising out of COVID period. And also in the last few years, we have seen disruption arising out of geopolitical issues. Now, these were the two main reasons of the role getting further evolved, or the transformative role, besides many other issues in terms of the legal and regulatory mechanism is so complex in today's world, and that one or the other wrong decisions may make or mar your business. So the way in which I look at it is that disruption in all those areas, and those disruptions are what? The disruptions which is leading to your reputational disruption, or your business disruption because of these factors, like in the last 5 years, because of COVID situation, supply chain disruption, or geopolitical issues and all that, and that led to this transformative role. And today, as I said, that we have a role of a strategizer, enabler, and protector for the business. Strategizer for the business, enabler for the business, and protector for the business, which is a significantly transformative role from the role which we witnessed earlier, which was a support function. So this is how I look at it.
Sanjeev, thank you very much for that. Rajiv, can I turn to you next? In the
Sure.
context of what we've discussed, I want to ask you, what business skills do you think in-house counsel need to develop to become serious partners for the business? Specifically, I'm curious for your take on whether in-house counsel now need greater or more specialized financial literacy to understand and solve the biggest commercial problems facing business.
Thanks, Shishir. See, I think it's pretty simple. As I told, in my role with various corporates, including I think the maximum period spent in Vedanta, I'll just share my experience. I think it should be more of storytelling. So first time I joined Vedanta was in Sterlite Industry in Tuticorin, and it was a very large manufacturing process complex, which was a 4 lakh ton copper smelter. And although it was a copper smelter, but larger business was sulfuric acid of almost 1 million ton. So every month 1 lakh of sulfuric acid, and then phosphoric acid. And so it was a very large operation, and whatever laws you can think of was applicable to the business. So understanding the business, is was very very important, that how copper is manufactured, because related to that was a lot of environment related issues. For example, I first time in my life I saw what is a secured landfill. While you may have studied in a textbook, but unless you go and physically see and understand, then only you can kind of add value. Also in terms of indirect tax, like as a, I am also a lawyer and also a qualified CS, so we have all studied indirect tax. Now this was a company where whatever you can think of indirect tax was there for you to kind of practice. Because copper was imported, so there is a system of provisional attach assessment, because you don't know what is the exact content of copper, gold, silver, and so many other metals. So samples has to be drawn every assessment. Normally when you import, you just pay the duty and the assessment is complete. And there were other complications, because we used to move the anode to the plant in Silvassa. So there was a, rule 46 permission which was required, and the Senbet credit rules. So I think unless you know the business, what exactly the company is doing, it's very very difficult uh, in terms for the legal house to add value. And I think there was lot, and the best part was that when I joined, I was a manager legal there, and later on, as I spent time in the company, I was also given the role of a company secretary, so which was a board level interaction. So I always say that I have been lucky and privileged that I had the view of the shop floor to the board, to the boardroom. It's like left and right. While you are discussing something related to maybe a M&A deal, or say a bonus issue or a split issue, or at the same time you are also interacting with the plant. So this is a very unique opportunity, and I think most of my kind of suggestions to any person who is looking for in-house role, they should spend some time working in the plants. Because we last year I had a legal meet for my in-house team, and I told I'm not going to any fancy place like Goa or backwaters of Kerala. Let's go to one of the plant. And believe me, taking the team to our plant in Orissa, taking them to the mines, that how a typical limestone mines look, what are the heavy equipments which are, what are benches. For example, in mines you can't just go and dig, you have to make benches, because that's part requirement of the mining plan and mine safety rules. Also taking them to the plant, how cement is being manufactured, taking them to the lab where cement is kind of tested, all the raw materials. So I think it was a great experience. The team was very excited, one, to get out from the metro and to see the real India, where the manufacturing is taking place, where the mining is taking place, and the sheer size and volume of the number of vehicles entering in the plant. So I think it's always said, say in a political, if I take the political example of a political party, you have to be a grassroots leader to become a member of parliament. I'll stop here. So you need to have of what is the actually nuts and bolt of the company, how it operates, what are the business. I'm reiterating this because this is very important. Sitting only in corporate office, and this especially for a manufacturing setup, I'm sure depending upon the nature of business, different perspective is required. So I'll stop here and we can take the discussion forward.
These are both really insightful answers, but Jolly, I want to bring you in because, of course, you work for a manager of third-party funds. So there's a fiduciary aspect here. So I want your take on how in-house counsel can balance commercial pragmatism with legal integrity, with legal issues, when inevitably they will collide.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting question. So I mean, I think I'll say one or two things that I feel I feel very strongly is that I think um, legal rightness, however you may define that, um, is not necessarily opposed to commercial pragmatism. It is pragmatic. It is commercially pragmatic to do the right thing. Okay, that is my belief. So of course the questions do come, where there are issues of gray, and where it is not so clear, where it is not a clear black and white. And so then you obviously have to take a call, and you have to take make a decision that is that the business can sustain. That is a decision that you are comfortable taking uh, when things are not so clear. But just as a principle, I don't see doing the right thing as being opposed to being pragmatic commercially, right? Because in the long run, for you to be able to keep a sustainable business going, it is not useful, or it is not value adding for you to be litigating or spending time at regulators' offices trying to solve issues that you've created by your actions. I mean, I guess it's also possible to say, and it's also true that you could, for no fault of yours, also could be sitting in regulators' offices and dealing with litigation, but that's not something you control. But to the extent that you control it, and where you have a choice to make, it is the pragmatic thing to do the right thing, it commercially speaking. The way I like to think of it, and it's an analogy that comes back to me very often, is would you drive a car which only has an accelerator and no brakes? And the answer to that question is a no. There is a reason why the accelerator is there. There is a reason why the brakes are there. You need both in order to make sure you get to your destination. If you're only hitting the brakes, you are never going to go anywhere. If you're only hitting the accelerator, you're going to crash and burn, neither of which is what you want to do as a business, right? You have to apply the brakes when required. You have to, hit the pedals when you need to, and both work in tandem. It's not it's not opposed to, it's not one opposed to the other. It's not like, oh, the brake has a problem with the accelerator. No, or vice versa, right? It's, you have to work together to get to the outcome, which is wherever you want to go with your car, right? So you bring a different perspective to things, right? So when somebody wants to go full speed at something, and then you have to kind of stop and say, guys, have you thought about this, and have you thought about that, and these are the issues, and how do we solve for this? That's you applying the brakes, to not because you have a problem with getting to where you want to go, but to make sure that you do get there, and you get there without problems, right? So that's how I like to think about it. I don't see it, and I want to reiterate that. And it's easy for lawyers to make that mistake, and it's easy for commercial colleagues to make that mistake, to kind of see ourselves in opposition to each other. But if we are business thinkers, and our colleagues believe that we are business thinkers, then they value the perspective that we bring, which is not to stop things, or not to say, oh no, this cannot be done, but okay, how do we do this in a way that doesn't create problems for us? Or how do we do this in a way that doesn't crash and burn? So that's, you bring a different perspective, and that helps you get to your destination, whatever that is for your business.
Jolly, very insightful first point, and I love the metaphor. Rachit, I'm going to turn to you. You've, of course, mediated many times between candidates for in-house roles with the institutions that they serve. In your experience, what are the cultural barriers inside Indian companies that come in the way of business thinking by in-house lawyers?
Uh, right. So I think some of these cultural barriers stem from the traditional perception of, the legal function in an in-house context. And of course, the extent of this varies between organization and industry. We see it a little more stronger in smaller organizations or, legacy promoter-driven organizations. But the first cultural barrier that comes to mind is that legal is a cost center. And unfortunately, the plight of a cost center is that in many cases, it's either undercapitalized or it's understaffed, and you're expected to do a lot more with a lot less. In fact, I came across this study done by EY. They polled 1,000 GCs globally and posted their findings online. Uh, about 60 odd percent of the GCs mentioned that capital constraints was a primary concern, in securing the requisite expertise to keep pace with business. And almost 85, maybe more percentage of the GCs mentioned that, cost reduction or cost cuts is one of their primary KPIs. And furthermore, of course, Rajiv ji seems like the exception here, but very rarely do we see legal counsels, getting fully integrated with other functions through, through cross-functional rotation, or through, financial literacy programs, or through business integration programs. So what typically happens is that a lawyer or the legal team becomes more inward looking rather than more commercially integrated. And another barrier that comes to mind is that legal is a support function. So sometimes, business feels that legal may not understand the business as well, or it's a risk. It's a risk averse function, so maybe they don't. There's no appetite for even optimized or acceptable risks. And so, we've created this post facto legal review culture in which the legal team is embedded into the process a little after, an in principle decision has been made or an investment decision has been made. And again, I feel this, affects the motivation of the legal team to develop a business acumen. When you come in late into the process, there could be some gaps in the understanding of what strategy the business had in mind when they set out to take this particular course of action. Or, at an advanced stage when the legal function and maybe rightly raises some structuring red flags or some deal boundaries, it seems more obstructionist. And of course, due diligence is time intensive. So, Shashir, you would appreciate that in current situations, even delays morph into no's. So I think these barriers typically have come in the way of, developing this business thinking, as you referred to.
And Rachit,
Back to you.
uh, and from what you have seen, what best practices have you seen the GCs and chief legal officers implement to dismantle some of these barriers to create a more integrated commercial legal function?
Right. So I think, Rajiv ji did mention about how, you take your legal team across the organization. He took them to the factory, the workshop floor. So maybe I don't want to repeat that, but if you permit me, I could narrate a parable to, reinforce this point. So this is a case where a retail giant was looking at entering into a distribution agreement with a logistics vendor, and business had pretty much finalized the terms and sent the agreement to legal for its approval. And please allow me a little bit of leeway on the legal terms because I'm not a lawyer. But what the GC did was, he did a little bit of a deep dive into this agreement and tried to align the contractual risks with the operational risks, and then sat down with, the sales, the supply chain teams, as well as the vendor to redesign the SLAs, to redesign the SLA metrics. So they focused on they built the SLAs around what activities the vendor could control, indemnify the vendor from any punitive action against for activities that the vendor may not be able to control, or some errors that may have originated at the retailer's end. They created a more tiered SLA in which you factor in or you codify for a metro delivery versus a non-metro delivery versus a remote location delivery, a high value delivery versus a more bulk item delivery. They capped liability at a fair amount. They built transparent mechanisms for for disagreements, and they also did some forecasting and some planning for surge in demand like around Diwali or any other occasion. So what the outcome of this was that the vendor was quite happy because his risks were more in his control, and it actually affected a 12% saving in distribution costs. So that really drives this point about how important it is to understand the business that you operate in. You need to understand your business not only from a macro perspective but right down to unit economics. So of course, he's spoken about how intensive industry regulation is, and business leaders often lean on GCs for regulatory intelligence. And that's, I think, one area where a GC can gain a tremendous clout. And, apart from the industry, understand the market that you operate in, because every market has different forces. It's a different competitive landscape. Your leverage vis-a-vis your client and your vendor differs. And I think these inputs really, really help you come with commercially feasible legal advice. You can't always push for ideal clauses in non-ideal markets. And, I know I've spoken a bit, but Shishir, if you allow me a minute more, I think that these barriers can't be dismantled by the legal team alone. It's more of a whole of firm approach. So the firm also needs to create the right ambience to effect this change. And, two practical ways that we've seen firms do this is one is in which they embed the legal team early into the ideation phase. Because, if legal really helps shape the strategy, rather than just finesse it at a later stage, I think, roadblocks and bottlenecks become much more rare. And wherever possible, and this is industry specific, try and align the legal team's KPIs with business KPIs. So the traditional KPIs that have governed, or the legal team need to evolve. You need to look at, not only that contract turnarounds, but reduction in disputes, or how much value were we able to preserve, or how much revenue were we able to save in a negotiation. So these kind of matrices really, really help, aligning KPIs as well. Back to you.
Thanks, Rajat. Keeping on with the top point of tactical steps, I want to turn to Rajiv now. You did have some good concrete suggestions of what you've done, but I'd like to build on that. And I'd like to ask you, what practical steps in-house teams can take to become more commercially literate?
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to carry from where Rachit was telling, that the in-house team should be part of the whole business induction, if I may say. So just to share, I am part of the executive committee of the Dalmia Bharat Limited, and that is where, if I think like a typical lawyer, sometimes I may feel out of place that what role I have to do when project capex of 3,000 crore is being approved. But it's very important. For example, if you are doing a project, there may be land acquisition issues, whether the land acquisition is being done rightly or not. Because when you are doing a land acquisition, there are almost 50% is legal, right from document of title to acquiring a land which may be owned by a scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. There are certain, regulations which needs to be, laws needs to be followed. Then state wise, again, there is a different set of local rules and regulation which has to be seen. And please pardon me, because most of my experience has been in manufacturing, so typically I'll touch upon issues. So I think the whole process of taking an environment clearance, the MOEF process, public hearing. So somebody may file a petition in the court saying the public hearing should not go, because there are, how India typically works. If you are investing 3,000 crore, everybody wants a pie in the cake without doing anything. So they will create problems. And if the in-house team and the entire team is aware of the whole process, they are more prepared in terms of suggestions, inputs, little more proactive. And I think time is the very essence. So I have seen, if there is a let's say a public interest litigation filed or red filed, if you are very well prepared, do the proper briefing to the council, the outcome can be different. Whereas if you leave it, there may be an ex parte order against us. So it's how proactive the team is. So I just wanted to say that there's a lot of change in terms of the GC being part of the executive committee, which has made us a lot of change in terms of the GC understand, the in-house team understands what's the business, and they are working day in and day out to resolve a lot of the issues. Sometimes we are faced with stamp duty issues. So that's one. And what was your question? I just missed it. What are some of the practical tips you were saying?
Yes, to increase
So
commercial
I'll,
literacy.
so generally, who joins new into the team? So I just give myself, although there's a complete induction planned, with, but in many corporates, I feel the induction is not taken seriously. I feel it is very important. So I just to give an example to my team, one is that my current organization is into building material. So I always tell that you should know how cement is manufactured. And very important aspect is that what does a 50 kg cement bag cost? And they don't have the remotest idea. Somebody will say 1,000, somebody. I told it is sold for an average, let's say current price at 350 rupees. What is the weight of a bag? It's 50 kg. So what is per kg? It is not even 7 rupees. The newspaper waste which you sell to some kabadi wala, it's sold for 10 to 12 rupees a kg. So the cement is sold at a price less than the waste which you sell from your house, used newspaper. So please understand, it is a low value, high volume product, and 30% to 35% of your cost is logistics cost. So, what is typically an integrated unit or grinding unit? Again, I am coming back to the point that unless you understand and I have also faced sometimes issues where if you hire a lawyer who has been in practice for 8 to 10 years, initially they have this typical mindset. My job is to, go and brief the senior counsel, file the reply, and that's all. So I think sometimes bringing such lawyers into the mainstream in terms of understanding business is the job of the management, including the general counsel, because some of them may not be aware of how Excel works. So I think giving training on there is something called, like I used to do in my previous organization, legal for non-legal. So we have initiated a program called finance for non-finance, where you basically explain. Like I'm just giving another example. When we went to the offsite, I made a presentation that what is the market cap of Dalmia vis-a-vis the competitor, and why this market cap is not there. So you should know where your company is. So it was little bit of revelation to them, and there were a lot of questions around them. So this is how you develop the culture of, business legal, if I may say so. So I think today, whether it is a promoter-driven company or it is a multinational, I was earlier with ACC and Ambuja when it was part of Wholesale. The GC was very much part of the executive committee. So there has been a lot of change because GC today is not only, so for example, you may end, because of the nature of business in which we are, we definitely land up in litigation, mostly with the government, because there may be certain demands. So one of the key, and Rachit, you spoke about the matrix. So maybe 1,000 crore contingent liability or 2,000 crore contingent liability is sitting on the balance sheet. It's very important for the legal team to take a time bound approach, that how do you reduce it to, let's say 50% or bring it below 25%. It's a very important matrix, because while a contingent liability, depending upon how it is assessed as probable, possible and remote, and one good example I'll say in the telecom sector was the AGR dues. When it came, it actually hit the telecom industry very badly, to the extent it led to a lot of M&A, Idea getting merged with Vodafone, and still, still they have a long way to go. So I think some of this contingent liability, which sometimes misses the, maybe the focus of the management, I think very important that it should be reviewed regularly. What is, and obviously we have a lot of limitation in terms of huge pendency in the courts. Matter do not get listed. If it is listed, it doesn't reach. If it reach, maybe the bench is not inclined to hear. Other side will take adjournment. All these difficulties is there, but still you have to keep trying, pushing. Sometimes there are a lot of strategic issues in terms of getting approval which is stuck, or getting a mining lease which is not, you are not able to operate because of certain, again, approvals and some decisions pending from the state government, which becomes very important as part of the strategy, if I may say. And we are all living in a VUCA world, as I call it, as the business world call it. This is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So I think time is the essence of whatever strategy you are doing. Suppose you want to put a 3,000 crore cement plant or a steel plant, whatever. There are certain, assumptions which the business takes in, that if I'm going, market is good today, the market may not be good after 4 years. And I think while all the state governments keep on signing these MOUs, with due respect, I think the ease of doing business, which we have been talking at the central level, has to really percolate to the every state level. So I think resolving all these issues, understanding the larger picture is very, very important for the in-house team. That is where they become integral part of the business. I think we can take the discussion forward.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. I think the next question that I have for Sanjeev ji is related. Um, how do you get in-house teams to break down silos and integrate more deeply with the business? Sanjeev, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, before I speak on this specific question, I have a few comments, particularly the comments where we say in-house teams are support functions or cost centers. Of course, I agree, traditionally they have been considered as cost centers or support function. But there's an evolving role. evolution is happening today as well, as we discussed about various disruptions and various issues. I just want to give a context here. And when we say that what is the purpose of the organization, the purpose of the organization and what World Economic Forum says that continue the organization for posterity. And today we are talking about, with that purpose, stakeholder capitalism. And with that we talk about ESG and governance norms and all that stuff. So it essentially means that, and the stakeholder capitalism essentially means that the organization should be taking care of all stakeholders and it should be continuing for the posterity. Now, just relate this objective with what an organization does. And the organization is faced with various issues and challenges, not only from a business standpoint, but then from legal regulatory standpoint. And one or the other issues may collapse your organization. So when you say that support function or cost centers, perhaps it is no longer that kind of that kind of nomenclature which should be used for general concepts or announced concepts or legal teams. Because one or the other wrong decisions, wrong handling of litigations may lead to collapsing the organization, as Rajiv rightly pointed out, AGR dues, for example, or the 2G issues, for example. And there are multiple issues of this nature whereby one or the other compliance related issues, whether on the environmental front or otherwise, or the outcome of one or the other litigations, they have collapsed organizations. One fault or default not considered in the right perspective may get you to bankruptcy. And we have ample examples for that. So I would say first that yes, rule as is evolving, rule would continue to evolve. And the very fact that today we are discussing in this webinar the role and relevance, it is very clear that despite no statutory recognition, this role is being recognized today. And organizations are focusing on this role because organizations have realized the importance and relevance of this profile. Now, coming to your specific issue in terms of, I think, breakdown of integrating the teams with the business teams, correct, Shishir? Now, look, Shishir, I think it's largely a mindset issue. And as we see, the role is evolving. Most of the people in the in-house teams, they are still continuing that mindset that their role and relevance is limited and restricted to legal issues. If an agreement comes to them, they would be reviewing their legal clauses and referring the business clauses to the business team. I think that itself is the trigger point of not performing your duties clearly. And for that matter, even on the litigation front, if you don't understand business properly, you cannot do justice to litigation. You need to know your business properly. Now, how would this happen? And this can only happen through collaboration, formally and informally. And that for collaboration, you need to develop that mindset of collaborating and also realizing that you are no longer performing a role of a legal reviewer. You are beyond all that. The moment you do that, I think things fall in place. Shishir, no litigation can be won unless you create a team of external and internal people, which would include business people, compliance people, legal people, and so on. And unless you collaborate with those internal and external stakeholders, it's not possible to win a case. You need to involve them. It's a witnesses, cross-examination, this, that you need to be collaborating. Now, This particular requirement requires more and more involvement with the people. Now, uh, I think some sort of one is the two things which are important in terms of creating that kind of environment. One is the, for example, the webinar kind of series which you people do. It's also creating that awareness that your role has expanded, role is evolving, and so on. And the second thing is, I think that the mindset issue which needs to be changed, and where the responsibility is of all the legal people in the system in terms of developing their team members accordingly. And I think mostly GCs are doing this kind of role. I'm sure Jolly, Rajiv, or for that matter, many others also, they are doing that kind of role where today they are involving their legal teams from the very inception of a transaction and making them understand about the business requirements and then do justice to the contracts or litigations. This is how I look at it, Shishi. Thank you.
Shishir, if I can just add on to what Sanjeev Bhai said, actually, it is said that how the pudding is made is lies in the taste. When you taste it, you say it's nice or good. So I think if the in-house has to add credibility to whatever they do, once you interact with any function or any department, if you really add value, they will come again and again and again. But if you give a theoretical gyan, yeah, this is not possible, simply saying that this is not possible, obviously they will distance away. इसके पास जाके कोई फायदा नहीं है, solution नहीं देता है. I'm just putting it in plain Hindi. But if you add value, look, there is an issue. I'm flagging this issue, but then can we do like this? Can we? There is some, path, or with a caveat that this may lead to some, how do we mitigate that risk which is there? One may be, so I divided it between three, areas. One is no-go area. You cannot go. It is simply not possible. You are putting somebody may come and want to deal with the sanctioned country. The answer is no, you can't go. It's simply, you may get a $10 discount, but that is not possible because that is because the procurement guy wants to show that he has done a saving of $1,000 or so some is okay, you can do it, but then you need to have these caveat or systems in place. So once we start adding that value, I think the integration automatically will happen. This is my own experience. I just wanted to add this point. It should, so that I don't miss it. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. It occurs to me, Jolly, that you're in the unique position of being not just a GC for your own institution, but also interacting with a lot of other GCs for your portfolio companies. So I have a question for you from what you've seen of best practices about what are, in your experience, some of the best practices around communication between in-house counsel and senior management that helps them demonstrate strategic value.
Okay. Communication is something that we're all experts at, right? Lawyers know how to communicate. That's what we do. We trade in words for a living, right? So, but I think one of the things that we are probably not so good at doing, and which is important for us to achieve a lot of the things that I think have been discussed on this panel already, which is to understand the business and so on and so forth, is good listening. You have to listen well to understand what management wants to achieve, what the issues are, what the problems are. And when it's only when you listen well. You can't, if you walk into a conversation with, knowing exactly what you want to say, and then just you're going to, you give your spiel and then you're done. That's not going to get you anywhere as far as adding strategic value goes. For you to be able to add strategic value, you have to listen, hear, understand. So listening is something that I think as lawyers we can all do better, and especially as in-house counsel, it's important to not merely hear but listen to understand. And when you listen, and then you have, how do you demonstrate strategic value? By asking questions around what you are listening to, so that you can understand more fully what the issues are, and what the ancillary issues might be. And then you are able to frame a response, and it's okay and it's appropriate to take time to think about your response. To, you may have a gut level reaction, and you may have a more thought through reaction. It's important to take that time, if required, get external advice, discuss with others, read up on other things before you provide a response. I usually, in my experience, I usually have a gut level response, just in terms of how something is sounding to me. But where appropriate, I will always say, let me look at this and let me think about this further and come back to you. But I won't add value unless I have truly understood the problem, which I will not do unless I listen well and I ask the right questions. Questions are, I think, in-house counsel's best friends. It took me a while to understand this. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, but because there is no, for in a GC kind of a role, there is no way for you to know and see and be aware of everything that is happening across all the various things that are your responsibility. How do you get on top of that? You ask good questions. You want, so that you are able to determine where there is an issue, where there is a problem, and where intervention is required, where you need to get in more detail, and so on and so forth. So, for you to demonstrate strategic value as a communication, if you're asking me what communication you need to do better, before you talk, listen, make sure you understood well, ask the right questions, and then provide a thought through response.
Thank you very much, Jolly. At this point, I'd like to see if we have any questions from the audience. And while those questions come in, let me just see if we can cover some more ground with our panelists. Rajiv, this one is for you. I think you've mentioned in your discussions earlier about the metric by which in-house should be measured. I want to ask you, how, in your experience, can in-house counsel manage the increasing speed of business decision making while at the same time ensuring quality?
Yeah. So Shishir, I think typically in my current organization, the metrics, as I touched upon earlier, is one is to, how do you reduce the contingent liability? And then obviously there are certain strategic initiatives of the business. For example, you may want to expand, put a new plant in a new area, and for whatever reasons that is stuck. So those are all kind of documented as part of the overall. So because it is integrated to the organization's business plan. The business plan is to increase the capacity from, let's say, current 50 million to 75 million, and there will be certain bottlenecks in terms of strategic. So resolving those issues becomes part of the GC's KRA, and then it falls back to the entire team. That is another matrix. The third is on obviously in terms of, I also happen to be the chief risk officer. So in terms of governance, risk and compliance, so uh, you know how many meetings you are doing with the risk council, because for every plant there is a risk council. So whether those meetings are happening, and what are the measurements for that. Cost obviously is a very important metrics. You have to be mindful of the cost. So whatever best you can do in terms of engaging and getting a fixed fee, or so this is another metrics. And obviously there are other softer issues in terms of developing the team, because the team should also be future ready in terms of what are the technological disruptions which are taking place in terms of use of technology. So I think these are some of the metrics which I feel are clearly measurable, as we call it as the smart KRA. It has to be specific, measurable. It should be achievable. It should be time bound. So I think, and also ensure that you don't land up in terms of increasing the litigation. So can you resolve some of the business issues at the inception stage itself? These are some of the metrics here.
Thanks a lot, Rajit. Rajit, I'm going to turn to you now, and drawing on some of the themes so far. What do you think the role of the in-house counsel is in shaping corporate culture and values? And how do you think in-house teams can stop being seen as the department of no, I think as they're commonly referred to?
Right. So, the role of a legal counsel in shaping corporate culture can be quite paramount because the council sits at the intersection of sales, operations, HR, governance, risk. So, a council can actually help set the ethical tone right at the top, when it comes to business leadership by not only guiding them on legalities or legal feasibility, but also how a particular course of action may impact firm morale or may impact the long-term reputation of the firm. They can really, help build this culture where ethics trump any expediency. But not only limited to the leadership, the GC also has the legal team has a powerful role in which it can influence org behavior through the rank and file as well. We see GCs collaborating with sales teams or vendor management teams to ensure that fair practices are codified in agreements, whether it comes to sales incentives or vendor selections. We see GCs collaborating a lot with HR to influence how employees engage internally and how they perceive what is okay and what is not okay. This could be through, whistleblower policies, conflict of interest disclosures. There was an interesting article on how the cultural, how there's been a cultural transformation at Microsoft, in which the leadership gave the legal team a carte blanche to devise very inclusive workplace policies and modernize, complaint handling, modernized protocols for investigations, anti-retaliatory mechanisms to create, a very safe atmosphere and look after well-being of employees, especially during investigations. So yeah, to sum up, it's a very front and center influence that GCs can have on the org culture. And I think with regards to your next question about how we can shirk off this perception of being referred to as the Department of No, I think Jolly and Rajiv ji have already touched upon this. Firstly, when you have to say no, you have to say no. There are non-negotiables. You have to hit the brake at some point. You just cannot keep hitting, the accelerator. But I think, the best way to shift perception is to rebrand yourself as the Department of Yes If. Like Rajiv ji mentioned, you come to the table not with vetoes, but you come to the table with options. So instead of saying we can't do this, say, maybe we can do this if we change X, or we cap liabilities at Y, or we, structure it in another way. And there's another example or case study that I came across. If I can take a minute just to touch upon it, because I think it really drives this point. So this is, in regards to a Canadian SaaS company, which is an online or on cloud subscription-based platform which helps people set up online shops. The merchants who were empaneled with them wanted to sell their products globally. but were very concerned about domestic tax regulations in different jurisdictions, domestic e-commerce regulations or data privacy regulations. So what the legal team did very effectively in this case is they actually did not view this regulation confusion or this regulatory confusion as a risk. They viewed it as an opportunity. So they worked with product design, they worked with finance and sales to actually create modules for taxation, cross-border selling modules, data compliance modules, and embed this into the platform as value-added services. And as a result, their subscriptions expanded, the GMV expanded. So it's a great way in which a legal team, instead of obstructing or saying no, really came up with a positive solution. And this is the heart of business thinking. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Rajat. I think it's all of us can agree that you can't have a webinar and not talk about AI. So I'm going to turn to you, Sanjeev ji, and ask you if you have a point of view on how AI will reshape the in-house legal function in India over the medium term, say over the next 3 to 5 years.
Interesting question, Shashir. My simple answer is that AI will replace all in-house lawyers who do not adopt AI because it's bound to happen. And the reasons are very simple. Your business processes would be based on technology and AI. Your regulatory and investigations processes are based on technology and AI. Can you be aloof? Your legal processes are also based on AI. If you don't adopt it, your counterparties are definitely adopting it. All your compliance tools are now AI based. All your litigation related matters, they are AI based. This predictive analysis you are not doing alone, your counterparties are also doing it. So can you afford to have your in-house lawyers not trained in AI? Answer is definitely no. And my answers are simple, that it's AI will stay here. You better adopt it as early as possible, because rest assured, the world is adopting this, and your counterparties are adopting this, and your counterparties include government regulators, investigating agencies, and so on. So I think it would be a complete transformation of the legal function in the next 3 to 5 years for two reasons. One is AI, and the other is the business orientation which is required in the in-house teams. I think it would be a complete transformation.
Thank you. Jolly, I'm going to bring you in on this topic too. What do you, in your from where you see things, what skills do you think in-house lawyers must develop to continue staying relevant in an AI?
Okay. Before I answer that question, I just one more thing occurred to me on the question you asked me earlier about communication. Is edit ruthlessly in terms of to get your point across to the absolute key elements. Nobody has time to read pages and pages and tomes of stuff. Nobody has the time or the attention. So you have to cull out the key points and just make your point as concisely as you can, concisely and effectively, and communicate very effectively. It's a skill I learn every day. I rewrite every email 5 times before it goes out. Emails that are of that carry some weight of this type. So, or any other communication, it's clarity and conciseness are absolutely key. So just as a point on communication, I think it's very key. I've learned it since coming into an in-house, but it's important. So coming to your question on AI, what skills do lawyers need to develop in an AI-enabled world? essentially you have to develop those skills which AI cannot replicate. Okay, AI can, and that, in my view, is being absolutely clear and certain on the law and the jurisprudence. Right? It is not the the AI tool that you're using has a set of things that it is looking at, and it can enable you to do things more effectively than you would if you were doing it on your own and had to read whatever 50 case law, right? Or multiple contracts or some extremely long tender document. If you had to read everything word for word from beginning to end, it will take you a certain amount of time to do it. If you work with an AI tool, it will work. You can work far more efficiently than you did otherwise. But what the uh, if you don't know your law, and if you don't know your business or your facts or whatever it is, right? Because what do you do as a lawyer? What do you do? Whether you are external counsel or in-house counsel, you are applying the law to facts. That's what you're doing. And so what we discussed, what I think has been discussed on this panel is about ways that, things that you can do to understand your business better so you are supremely clear on your facts. No AI model is going to be able to get there. Maybe eventually it will, depending on how much access your AI model has to your systems and your information. But at least for the moment, I think your lawyer's competitive advantages in knowing the details, the facts, the nuances extremely well, and also to know the law extremely well. Because when you look at the question is, when you get some output, let's say it's a memo or some advice or some view from a AI model, do you have what it takes to understand whether that is accurate, inaccurate, incomplete, complete? And that needs a full understanding of the facts and the law. So if you need to know that in order for you to be able to demonstrate value. Otherwise, if you can't do that, then you are easily replaced by AI. So you what skills do you need to develop? You better, I mean, your law, your understanding of the law, staying updated on the law, what is going on in your scheme of things, and what is going on in the business is absolutely key. If you don't have that, just reading a bunch of words and rewriting it in nice prose, AI can do very well. So that's not something that but what you bring to the table is your unique understanding of the facts.
Yeah, I agree, Jolly. I can see a stream of questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to pick a few. Sanjeev, maybe I'm going to direct this question to you. What are the top mistakes that in-house counsel make when trying to think like the business?
Shishir, I just missed that. One mistake which the in-house counsel do?
What are the top mistakes? What are the top mistakes that in-house counsel make when trying to think like the business?
Well, I think the mistake which they normally do, and I don't blame them for this because their orientation has been only in that fashion and they will take time to do this. They just go even of reviewing of any issue with the legal mindset of yes and no, while they don't realize that law gives us this flexibility of interpretation of law and interpretation of document in a different context, also in a different way also. So it's not 2 + 2 at times, it's a basic interpretation also which matters. Particularly I would say in an adversarial system or the common law systems which we have, there are always views and counter views, and all views and counter views may be correct. It's a matter of perspective and matter of interpretation. So normally lawyers, in-house counsels read a document with that perspective of of yes and no, while the answer may perhaps lie between yes and no. So this is how I look at it. Yeah. So they need to be expanding their horizon. They need to have more critical appreciation. I think somewhere in the lawyer's curriculum, English literature should be taught, because English literature teaches us how to make the critical appreciation of a literary work. And I think that will develop the competence in terms of interpreting the same document and same law differently, and which is very important and relevant as far as the common law systems are concerned, or where the adversarial justice delivery system is there.
Wonderful. I'm going to maybe just pick one last question from the audience, and I'm going to put this question to Rajiv Ji, you first, and then Jolly, I'm going to bring you in on the same question. What final advice do you have for young in-house counsel who aspire to become strategic business partners?
So I think it's, I said this earlier as well, that understand the business and, depending upon what business, let's say example, if you are in banking and finance, so understand what the company exactly done. If they are giving loans, who are the customer, whether it is corporate or it is individual loans, what are the issue, what kind of default company has faced in the past. So I think a lot of history will be there in the organization. Understanding those history, speaking to the business, in-house business partners or HODs or whosoever is there, will give you a lot of insight. So do your homework well. If you think that I'm a big lawyer and I'm here to give advice and the business is going to follow, I'm sorry, that is not going to happen. You have to first establish your place, for which it is very important to make friends, sometimes I would say. So in my experience, I have made a lot of friends in the plant to explain me. I'll just give one example. So my HOD, who was head of indirect taxation, gave me to prepare a reply of show cause notices related to lot of Senvet credit which was discontested by the department on capital goods. So there were a lot of MS angles and MS steels used. So till that time, I never knew what is a MS angle and MS steel. I went to the plant, made friendship with the engineer. मैंने कहा यार मेरे को ये बता MS angle क्या होता है, MS steel क्या होता है. बोला सर ये देखो ना ये खड़ा है, जो angle है, so it is mild steel angle. Never in my mind I thought what is MS angle. So I'm saying you make friendship. He will explain you. He'll explain you everything. And then once you understand, then you start adding value. So it's very important to make friends within the organization who can explain you the whole business. That's important. Law, you have to just marry both.
Jolly, can I bring you in on the same and the last question?
Sure. I completely agree with what Rajiv ji said. But I think the only addition I would make is you need to start solutioning type thinking. You have to be thinking of solutions. We're kind of trained to identify the risks and say these are the risks, and then have yes and no answers around those risks. But to say, okay, if I were doing this, what would I do? And think longer and think harder to see what is a calibrated way forward, right? What is a solution that will work and that will solve the problem, that will get what the business wants done, but in a way that doesn't create problems. So to think of solutions, to think of just as an example, if you're looking at a contract and you see provisions that don't make sense, you can do a red line. You can just cut things out and send it back, and that just goes into this round of back and forth. But if you leave an explanatory comment explaining why you're making the change, and where it could be because it's covered somewhere else, it's covered because this is your issue, as a result of which you are unable to accept this. But here again, I mean, this is listening, what I was talking about earlier, right? You have to, when you're you listen when you're reading as well, when you're reading a contract as well, and you're trying to understand what is it that the other guy wants, what is it he's looking for, how can I solve that without compromising my position. You have to find a solution. You offer that solution in the draft, writing it up differently in a way that makes sense for you. Come up with some compromise, some alternative solutions. So start thinking like that, and that's a in order for you to develop, show value to the business and show value and add value to the business, and not to be seen as the department of no, as we discussed earlier. People need to see how you are helping them getting deals done, or getting whatever it is that you are involved in doing. So finding solutions is a key part. That's not something that comes naturally to us. It's something that we have to start. You have to work on.
Thank you very much, Jolly. And with that, I think I'd like to start drawing this webinar to a closure. I'd like to start with what I thought were the key takeaways for me. Clearly, greater integration with the business team, better communication with the business team, and within communication, I think we've heard a lot of panelists emphasize how becoming better listeners is critical. And lastly, I thought the point about integrating KRA to be in-house with those of the business stood out to me as key takeaways. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in the poll. I would like to thank all our panel members for sharing their time and experience with us. You were simply outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shishir. Thank you very much for
Thanks,
organizing
Shishir.
this.
Thanks, KCO, for having us. I think it was a pleasure meeting all my co-panelists as well. So I knew Sanjeev, but I think Rachit and Jolly, good to connect, and Shishir as well.
Likewise. Thank you, and kudos
Thank
to
you all.
Ketan for doing this this series. I wish I had something like this when I began this in-house role. I'm glad this is a resource that's available to folks today.
I'd also like to thank our
Thank
you
you.
for the questions. I think it's fun, but interesting and worthwhile. After the webinar, we'll send you a copy of today's presentation materials, summary notes, and you will separately receive a request for feedback. Please take the time to send us your feedback. It will take less than a minute to complete. And members of the audience, if you are interested in in-house training or any other matters arising from the webinar, please do not hesitate to contact us. Our contact information is on the contact slide at the webinar. Thank you each one for your attendance, and we look forward to having you again with us in the in-house counsel.
Thank you very much.